It's not my first time. So I flew over here in 2014, so almost 10 years ago, and I had heard all about the Ohio National from great poultry fanciers in the UK, like my friend Mike Hatcher and John Soper. And when I was younger, always had this kind of vision of coming over for myself. And I'd never been to the States. I'm not overly well travelled generally, and back in 2014 I just decided I wanted to come over, saved up my money at the time, some pocket money. My parents were quite worried, I think, at the time. They dropped me off at Heathrow Airport, not knowing what to think, but came over, made sure I stayed in a hotel where I knew there'd be lots of poultry people around. And the lovely thing about being in the States is as soon as I open my mouth and start talking with my very normal English accent, people tend to flock to me, particularly if I then talk about chickens as well. So I made friends really quickly, actually, and had lifts to and from the hotel by kind people who were showing and judging, and just had the best time. And then went back. We had some American fanciers come over and see us in the UK, come to our national show. But I always made it a mission of mine to want to come back. And I had a few people get in touch and say, look, Jed, we've got this big show in November. It's the big APA 150th year anniversary show. It would be worth you coming out, basically. And I've got quite a lot going on day to day in my life, but I really wanted to come out, so made that commitment. I'm very glad I did, because it's an amazing show. Yeah, hugely different. So when I came out in 2014, I did in Clark, as you call it, and we call it stewarding back home. I didn't do any of that, and I have done this morning, which is great fun. Your paperwork is very different, so and I understand it's different depending on where you're showing in the US as well. But back home, every pen cage has a pen number, and that identifies the bird, not necessarily the owner. Whereas over here, you have a number for the owner, not a separate pen number. So when I was going through this morning, it took me a while to get used to the system that you have. So that's probably one of the key differences. Other than that, just the way the sections are. So we don't have a clean-legged rose comb section or clean-legged single comb section, which obviously in this instance, Rhode Island Red that's single combed is in a different section to a Rhode Island Red that's rose combed. In our system, you have soft feather heavy, soft feather light, true bantams, which are your rose combs, your sea brights, things like that. So the sections are dealt out differently, but I'd say it probably works quite well for us. It's straightforward, and that definitely works. So that's a key difference to the way things are done over here. Other than that, judging is similar. When I was stewarding this morning, chatting away with the judge who I was with, we're looking for the same things. We're looking for the same faults, we're looking for the same clarity in some areas, looking over the wing, looking at the undercolour, looking at the feet, looking at the comb, things like that, all pretty similar. And while the standards for quite a lot of our breeds are quite different, so the standards for breeds over here, so your Minorcas are very different to our Minorcas, your Leghorns are very different to our Leghorns. There are also a lot of breeds where they are very similar, or at least we're both aiming for a very similar thing. So cool ducks, for instance, which I breed, are very similar. Around the world actually, but particularly between the UK and the US. So it's nice to see both the differences but also the similarities as well, and chat those through with some of the exhibitors here. So I think if you think of the size of the UK compared to the size of the USA, our big national show, now we've not had a national show since 2019 because of the pandemic and then because of bird flu. We're only now having chicken shows but no waterfowl, and they're only small local shows. But before that, in 2019, we probably had around 7,000 entries at our big national show. And you would literally have people come from right across the UK. So from the Highlands of Scotland, from the tip of Cornwall down in the southwest, from Wales, and from the east of England, you'd have everyone flock to somewhere called Telford in Shropshire to show their birds. Now, I think I'm right in saying you've got well over 10,000 entries here today. But when you think of the size of the USA compared to the size of the UK, I don't think we're doing too badly. Geography obviously plays a part. So, everyone can get to Telford in the UK within probably 6-7 hours. Obviously for here that's very, very different, and I think that probably plays a part. But our big shows get a decent entry, and I think we really miss it because when you're trying to keep the standard of your breed or variety that you're keeping up as high as you can, having a big class, and that's what we're aiming for, classes of 10, 20, 30, 40 birds in one class, means that you are trying to stay at the very top of your game. And that's great because it means that you're breeding the very best birds that you can because you want to do well. You don't necessarily want to be show champion at your small local show, but you want to be in the cards at the big national shows in the class of your breed, and I think that's what most people will be aiming for. Not really, to be honest, and it's to do with it's more difficult now because of Brexit. So we've always had fanciers come from Northern Ireland and from the Republic of Ireland. The Poultry Club of Great Britain covers Scotland, England, Wales and Northern Ireland. But we've always had fanciers from across Ireland, the island of Ireland. That has changed, albeit we've not really seen the impact of it because of the pandemic and then bird flu. But that has changed under Brexit because we've left the EU. Obviously, the Republic of Ireland is within the EU and we're not anymore. I would like to work very hard to try and stop that being the case in terms of those fanciers not being able to come to the UK, because there is very little difference in them doing it, but also it actually affects people in Northern Ireland who are still a part of the UK. They will struggle now to show in the UK without going through a lot of bureaucracy. So that's a real shame. In terms of the wider EU, their fanciers come to the UK to see our shows, and they will buy stock sometimes from our breeders when they can, particularly Old English Game and Modern Game are quite popular breeds that people will come over for. In terms of showing, though, not so much, and I think that's because across the continent they have very large shows of their own. So Leipzig, which I visited in 2012, it was poultry, pigeons, rabbits and cage birds, but they had around 70,000 entries at that show. So they have their own big shows, and also they judge differently to us as well, so they have scorecards, and it's all judged quite differently. So I think they like the way they probably do it in their own countries. Yeah, definitely. So when I came over in 2014, one of the big differences that I noticed was the fact that you didn't have an egg show. And they are a key part of our shows, whether they're small little agricultural shows or they are our big championship shows. And actually the bird flu issue has shown how important egg shows are, because while we haven't been able to show birds until very recently, we have been able to show eggs for that whole time. And therefore those clubs that want to have put on egg shows. So at our county shows, agricultural shows across the country, the poultry tent has had an egg show instead because they couldn't have live poultry, and it has enabled us to remain in contact and for fanciers to still see each other. And it's that whole social aspect of the hobby, which actually is way more important than the breeds or the standards or whatever. It's about coming together. And so it's proved instrumental actually in holding our fancy together during a really difficult time. Before that though, I always viewed it as a way of new people coming into the hobby, because if you've got just hybrids at home, but obviously you can still show their eggs, and I think a lot of people actually come into it via that way. So they'll enter some eggs at their little country show that they go to anyway, and it's just a nice thing to do. But then they want to know more and do more, and they'll get some pure breeds, and then they might start showing. And so it's a great way of bringing new people in. So I'm a huge advocate for it. When I was over here last time, I met a lovely lady called Susan from Texas, and they had done quite a lot to promote egg shows down there. And I think it's great. From what I understand, the entries here have tripled in the years, three years that you've been doing them. So I think there's a real love for it once you get it going. And I know fanciers that have come from elsewhere. A friend of mine from Norway who's come over is showing eggs. So it's something, I don't know how she managed to do that, because I would not have been able to bring eggs into the country, I don't think. But, it is a way that people can engage even if you can't show poultry, and I think that's a good thing too.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
Quite welcome.